So today I'm going to do a track breakdown on my brand new release out on Superstore Records right now. The track's called Let It Go.
I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go.
So that's my new track, Let It Go. It's out now. I'll put a link underneath this video to stream and download it if you want to help support the track. But let's get into this breakdown. So let's jump straight into it. This is the full final extended mix. There's loads of tracks in here, and I think I was probably just throwing around beats and stuff to start with, but it all really kind of kicked off with the vocal sample that I found. So this is the vocal that runs throughout the track.
I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it.
I love digging for samples, and when I found this vocal, I knew I could do something with it. I tend to find vocals from just about any source, but I think this one actually was from Splice. I've actually pitched it down by 3 semitones. This is the original sample.
I got to let it go, let it go, let it go, na 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 na, let it go, let it go, let it go, na na na.
I think there was just something in that sample that just stood out to me. The Let It Go part really kind of stood out to me as a kind of rhythmic device that I could use within the track. I didn't like the na 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 bit, so I kind of chopped that out. But also in the same sample pack, I then found this backing vocal as well.
I got to let it go, let it go, let it go, na 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 na, let it go, let it go.
And I thought what I could do is layer both of these together to kind of create more of an impactful kind of vocal. So I took those 2 vocal samples, pitched them down 3 semitones to give them that kind of deeper, darker kind of feel. And it kind of ended up a bit like this.
I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
It really layered up quite nicely, and I'm a big fan of kind of pitching vocals down because they almost give a richer kind of feel. So some vocals that maybe don't sound so good straight away, pitch them down a few semitones, and sometimes they have that nice kind of quality that kicks through. The beautiful thing about samples these days is they're so high quality, you don't really need to do too much to them. So really all I did was cut out the bottom end of that, boosted a little bit of the highs just to get that kind of crispness out of it. I'm a big fan of gem dopamine, which just kind of adds some saturation to the vocals, I think. Just gives it something, gives it some presence. A little bit of reverb on the channel there. I've got the Wolf compressor in there as well. I'm a big fan of this compressor. Adds a bit of lo-fi-ness to it. Another bit of EQ in just to give a bit of high end there, and finally a bit of soothe in there as well, just to get rid of some of those resonant frequencies. So really when I first started this track, I was actually just playing around with beats, and then I found that vocal and that kind of inspired the whole track. So what I thought I'd do is I like the melody within the vocal, why not use that for the bass as well?
Let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
So quite literally I took the melody from the vocal and used it as notes for the bass. So that bass is actually coming from the mono poly. I knew I wanted an organ kind of sound, and rather than using the standard kind of M1 organ, I thought I'd turn to the mono poly instead. And there's actually a really great preset on there called Third Perk Organ. It's more of almost like a kind of bass kind of sound, and it works really well in the mix. And with the vocals, it just works great.
Let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
So that worked really well, the bass following the vocal. However, obviously the vocal does have gaps in it, and the bass also had gaps in it. So what I thought I'd do is a call and response, have 2 different bass sounds. So what I did was introduce a second bass sound at the end of the bars. And that bass sound is actually coming from the DCO 106, which is a Juno 106 clone. I've got quite a few of these, but for this one, I really like that round bass preset. It's kind of a classic kind of Juno bass kind of sound, and it really kind of kicks through the mix really nicely. Now, the reason I picked this sound is because it has a good bit of punch to it, and I wanted that kind of contrast with the first bass. The first bass is very kind of legato, kind of long notes, and I wanted a sharp kind of almost 808 kind of boom boom at the end of a bar, just to add that kind of contrast in there. And with the drums, it all fits in really nice. Okay, so let's move on to the drums. Now, I usually start the drums in XO, which is a sample finder and sequencer all in one. I love this because I can quickly go through my hard drive and find the right sounds for my drums. So the right kick, the clap, the hat, the snares, everything within here. And I found all the right samples within here, and then I kind of sequenced it out and then exported all the stems from that into here. So we have the kick within here. It's a pretty heavy kick. And then I've got a few layers of claps in there as well. Actually 4 layers of claps. Each one kind of pans slightly different and kind of mixed differently in the mix. And then I've got my hats, which also includes some percussion in there as well. This really is a mixture of both individual program samples that I've done from one-shots and also going through and finding loops that I like. I tend to find drum loops that I really like and cut bits out of them. It's just the way I like working. I like working with samples. Just a nice little light hat there. Bit of a shaker from a loop there. Another shaker kind of hat in there as well. I've called this extra shaker, but it is essentially like a top loop. I've probably cut some bits out of there, maybe some of the other drums, but I've kept the bits that I like in there. And then just a really simple kind of closed hat in there. That kind of gives it all the kind of swing, I think. And then altogether it sounds like this. I don't have that much processing going on my drums, but I do have this DST multiband saturation. I really kind of like this. It's a cool plugin, and I like using it on my drums occasionally when I want a little bit of extra kind of thump from that kick. It just works really well on the drums bus. And yeah, I don't use it every time, but it certainly worked well in this case. So by this point, I've got my drums in there, my bass in there, my vocals in there, and everything's working really nicely. It's a solid beat, but I wanted some kind of musical elements in there. I love my chords, so my keys and my synths, and I wanted something like that in there. And what I really wanted to do was kind of bridge that gap where the vocal finishes. So actually I found this sample, this reversed synth kind of sample. Usually I will take a one-shot chord, for example, and reverse it and do this kind of trick, but I actually found this sample just browsing Splice. I think I was actually browsing by key, and this one sounded really nice. It's not within the same genre. It's 135 BPM. And there was just some kind of quality about it that I really liked, and it kind of worked really nicely just to fill that kind of gap.
Let it go, let it go, let it go. Let it go, let it go, let it go.
It really works nicely as a transition into the next bar. And those really are all the core elements of the track. I've tried to keep it really simple and kind of stripped back. I didn't want to overcomplicate this track because I wanted it to be a bit deeper. I wanted it to have a feel to it. And that's pretty much it. That's pretty much all the main elements. Of course, there are a whole load of extra bits that have been thrown in there. I've got a held string, for example. That's just really low in the mix. I'm kind of automating the volume with that as well. Again, as I mostly do, it's from the M1 by Korg. And also within the breakdown, I kind of wanted a break from that main vocal. I wanted something different.
Let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. Oh, if I'ma get over you, then I gotta let go of your ghost. I got to.
And this vocal sample I found in exactly the same sample pack. The bonus of that is obviously it all sounds coherent. It all sounds like the same singer.
Oh, if I'ma get over you, then I gotta let go of your ghost.
Again, it's sung quite high, so again, I've taken it down by 3 semitones and it all fits in really nice. As far as the arrangement goes, it's pretty kind of standard for one of my tracks. There's nothing kind of mind-blowing in there. However, there are a few little tricks here and there that I really like, especially at the end of the breakdown where it kind of all cuts out and you just got that vocal in there and then that bass kind of just kicks through. It just works really well, especially in the club.
Oh, if I'ma get over you, then I gotta let go of your ghost. I got to.
I kind of love the way the bass kind of kicks through there. And usually when you have bass in a breakdown, you kind of high pass it. So you get rid of some of that low end energy out of the bass. But with this, because everything has been stripped away, I kind of just wanted that bass to come in there full force, kind of full bass and just have that kind of subbiness from it. So it's that boom, boom, boom in there. It really works well in the club. And when I came up with that trick in the breakdown, I realized I could do something very similar at the start of the track as well. So at the start of the track, in the first breakdown, you have just the normal vocal coming in, which is just a single vocal on its own. And then you have the kind of the backing coming in underneath it as well to kind of thicken up that vocal. And I thought at the same time, you could also introduce that bass. And it really, really kind of works quite well.
Let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it go, let it go, let it go. I got to let it.
Because it's all kept to that kind of same note, it almost has an air of tension about it. It works really well.
Oh, if I'ma get over you, then I gotta let go of your ghost. I got to.
And that's it. It's a really kind of simple track. And I did that on purpose. I wanted to keep this quite stripped back and quite deep, almost like a mesmerizing kind of feel where every element in the mix is there for a reason and anything that didn't need to be there was just kind of cut out. So it's a very kind of stripped back kind of track, especially for me. And it was all influenced by that main vocal, like the melody came from that vocal and kind of everything kind of was formed around that. And that's, you can never kind of tell that. Sometimes it will come from a sample, sometimes it will come from a melody in my head. In this case, it was just finding that vocal sample and everything else was built around that. So yeah, hope this has been interesting for you, this whole breakdown. I've got loads more on my YouTube channel. And as I say, the track is out now on Superstore Records. The link underneath to stream it, download it and everything else like that.
Let it go, let it go. I got to. Oh, if I'ma get over you, then I gotta let go of your ghost. I got to. I got to